Welcome back to Mixing Up Success. I'm Dani from Dani's Kitchen Shop in Hood River, Oregon, and this is part 2 of our 3-part series on what actually holds bakers back from building the business they want. Last week, we talked about the fear that keeps you from starting it all: imposter syndrome, overwhelm, fear of failing. If you haven't listened to that one yet, go back after this and give it a listen. But today, we're talking about something that trips up bakers at every single stage, whether you're brand new or you've been selling for 5 years: pricing. I want to start with a question, and I want you to actually answer it, not just nod along. If you sold a dozen cookies today, could you tell me to the penny whether you actually made money on them? Not, did I cover what I spent at the grocery store? I mean, genuinely, after your time, your packaging, the electricity to run your oven, the hour you spent taking photos and answering messages, the batch you had to throw out because it didn't turn out right. Did you come out ahead? If that answer is fuzzy for you right now, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not behind. You are not bad at this. You're just missing math that literally nobody taught you. Nobody hands you a pricing class when you decide to start selling your baking. You figure it out, or more accurately, you guess. And I guessed for years. So let's talk about what that actually looked like and what fixed it. I'm a baker, a mom, a farmer's wife out here on an orchard in Hood River, Oregon, and I want to tell you, nobody in my life handed me a pricing sheet when I started this. I wore every single hat in this business from day one, and pricing was the hat that scared me the most because it felt like the one place where being wrong actually cost me real money, order after order, without me even realizing it was happening. Here's my honest starting point. When I first started selling cookies, I did not have a pricing formula. I had a feeling. I'd look at what other bakers in my area were charging. I'd think about what felt fair. I'd maybe pad it a little for just in case, and I'd land on a number. That number had almost nothing to do with what the cookies actually cost me to make. It was vibes. Confident sounding vibes, delivered with a smile, but vibes. And I want to be specific about why that's such a common trap, because I don't think it's about laziness or not caring. It's that pricing genuinely feels overwhelming when you sit down to actually do it. You open a blank spreadsheet, or worse, a blank notebook page, and you think, okay, I need to figure out ingredients and time and packaging. And what about the cost of running my oven? Is that even a thing I track? And what about the batches that flop? And what about platform fees if I'm selling online? And 40 minutes later, you've written down flour, $4. And close the laptop because it's just too much to hold in your head at once. That overwhelm is real. It's not a personal failing. It's what happens anytime you try to solve a multi-part math problem without a system to organize the parts. I lived in that overwhelm for longer than I want to admit. I can tell you exactly what it looked like on my end too, because it wasn't dramatic. It was just avoidance, dressed up as being busy. I'd get an order, I'd quote a price off the top of my head on what I'd charged the last similar order. I'd fulfill it and I'd move on to the next thing on my list without ever circling back to ask whether that number actually made sense. Weeks would go by, then months. I was too deep in the doing of the business to stop and do the math on the business. And honestly, some part of me didn't want to know the answer because I suspected it wasn't going to be good news. That's a very human reaction. If part of you has been avoiding your own numbers because you're worried what they'll say, I understand completely. But avoiding the number doesn't change the number. It just means you keep operating blind order after order while the gap quietly grows. And here's the actual cost of it, the number I want you to sit with for a second. I ended up raising my prices 250% over 5 years. 250%. That's not a typo, and that's not me being dramatic for a podcast. That's the real documented gap between what I was charging when I started guessing and what my actual numbers said I should have been charging the whole time. Every single one of those early years, I was working just as hard, producing just as much, and quietly leaving money on the table that I desperately needed because I didn't have the math. So let's actually talk about where to start, because just figure out your costs is not helpful advice on its own. I know because that's the advice that I got, and I stared at it the same way you might be staring at your screen now. Where you start is with what I call your true costs, not the grocery receipt, the real number. And the real number lives in 4 buckets, and I want to walk you through all 4 of those right now. Because if you take nothing else from this episode, take this framework. Bucket 1, ingredients. This is the one people actually do track, at least loosely. But here's where it gets missed. People track the ingredients in the recipe and forget the ingredients that support the recipe. The parchment paper, the food coloring, the vanilla that costs more than you think it does per ounce. Every single thing that touches that product needs to be in this bucket, priced out to the actual unit you use, not the size of the bag you bought it in. Bucket 2, your time. This is the one that gets skipped the most. And it is, without question, the most expensive mistake in pricing. Your time is not free just because you're the one giving it. Mixing time, baking time, decorating time, packaging time, the time you spend answering messages about the order, the time you spend on photos so people can see what they're buying, all of it is real time, and all of it needs a dollar value attached. Or you are quietly paying yourself $0 an hour to run a business. I want to say that again because I think it needs to land. If your time isn't in your price, you are working for free and calling it a business. Bucket 3, packaging. Boxes, bags, ribbons, stickers, the little card you tuck inside. All of it costs money and all of it needs to be divided out per item, not lumped into some vague supply category you never actually look at again. Bucket 4, overhead. This is the bucket most bakers have literally never applied to their formula. Your electricity, your water, the portion of your home that's dedicated to this work, even wear and tear on your equipment. It feels small per cookie, and it is small per cookie, but small numbers multiplied across every single item you sell all year, every year, are not small anymore. They add up to real money that either lands in your pocket or quietly disappears because nobody accounted for it. I want to slow down and go back to that time bucket one more time because it's the one I hear the most pushback on. Bakers tell me, but I love doing this. It doesn't feel like work I should be charging for. I understand that completely. Genuinely loving what you make is part of why this whole thing works. But loving your work and getting paid for it are not opposites. Nobody looks at a wedding photographer and says, well, she loves taking pictures, so she shouldn't charge for her time. The love is exactly why you're good at it. It has nothing to do with whether your time has value. Your time has value whether you enjoy spending it or not. And if you don't put a number on it, you are the only person in the transaction not getting paid for their contribution. And this is actually where efficiency earns its place in this conversation. Because I think it gets confused with cutting corners, and it's the opposite of that. Being efficient isn't about rushing your decorating or skimping on ingredients so your true costs look smaller on paper. It's about respecting the number once you actually have it. Once you know it takes 90 minutes to produce a dozen cookies, efficiency is asking honestly where those 90 minutes are going. Is 15 of them lost hunting for a piping tip you didn't have staged? Is a batch getting scrapped every few weeks because your oven runs hot and you hadn't adjusted for it? That's not a pricing problem. That's a process problem. And it's quietly inflating your true costs in a way that either eats your profit or gets passed on to your customer as a higher price than your product actually needs to carry. Tightening up your process, staging your ingredients, batching your packaging, having a system instead of reinventing your steps every single order is part of your responsibility as the person running this business. It protects your margin, it keeps your price honest, because you're not asking a customer to cover waste that a little bit of organization would have prevented. 4 buckets, run efficiently, ingredients, time, packaging, overhead. That's your true cost. That's the floor. I want to be clear. This is the floor, not the price. You cannot set a profitable price until you know this number. Everyone who skips straight to what should I charge without doing this step first is building their entire business on a guess. And I promise you, the guess is almost always too low. It certainly was for me. I want to give you a real example because numbers on a podcast can feel abstract until you see them applied. So, let's say you make a dozen decorated cookies. Ingredients run you $8 once you actually count the food coloring and the vanilla, not just the flour and butter. Packaging, the box, the tissue, the sticker, another $3. Now, the part everyone skips, time. If it takes you 90 minutes total from mixing to decorating to packaging to answering the message where the customer asks for a color change, and you value your time at even $20 an hour, which honestly is low for a skilled decorator, that's $30 of labor sitting inside that dozen. Add a small overhead number for the oven, the electricity, the wear and tear on your equipment. Call it $1.50. Add that up. 8 plus 3 plus 30 plus $1.50. That's $42.50. Your true cost for that dozen is $42.50. If you've been charging $25 a dozen because that felt fair, you are not breaking even. You're paying $17.50 for the privilege of making cookies for a stranger. That's the gap this framework closes. Okay, so you've got your true cost. Now what? Because knowing your cost is not the same thing as knowing your price. This is the second place I see bakers get stuck, and it's actually the place where the no easy button conversation really starts. So let's have it directly. Your price is your true cost, plus a real profit margin, plus any platform or transaction fees baked in from the start, not tacked on after the fact when you realize you're barely breaking even. Let me be specific about the last part because it's another one that quietly eats profit for a lot of bakers. If you're taking payment through an app or selling through a platform that takes a cut, or even just covering the card processing fee, that percentage needs to be built into your price before you ever quote it, not absorbed afterward when the payout hits your account and it's smaller than you expected. A lot of bakers do the true cost math correctly, feel great about their number, quote it, and then watch 3 or 4% quietly disappear at the end because the fee was never part of the plan. Small percentage, same story as overhead. It adds up across every single sale all year. I use an actual formula for this, not a feeling. A formula that takes the true cost number and turns it into a retail price that has a real profit built into it from the beginning. So the price works for you, not just for covering what you spend. I want to talk about the difference between wholesale and retail pricing here too, because this trips people up constantly. Your retail price, what you charge a customer directly, buying directly from you, and your wholesale price, what you charge if a shop or another business is reselling your product, are not the same thing, and they shouldn't be. Both have a place in your business as it grows. But if you're using your retail formula to quote wholesale or vice versa, you're going to end up underpaid in one direction and overpriced in the other. And either one causes real problems down the line. I also want to address the question I get more than most any other. But what if my price is higher than the baker down the road? Here's my honest answer. The other baker's price tells you nothing about your true cost. Nothing. Maybe they're underpricing too, genuinely likely given how common it is. Maybe their overhead is different. Maybe they're not counting their time at all. Copying a competitor's price is really just outsourcing your guess to someone else's guess, and stacking two unknowns on top of each other doesn't make either one more accurate. Your price has to come from your numbers, your ingredients, your time, your packaging, your overhead, your market. It's allowed to be different from the baker down the road. It's supposed to be, because your costs are different from theirs, even if your products look similar side by side. Before we get to raising your prices, I want to name something that I think gets missed in almost every pricing conversation, and it's this. Pricing is not a task you complete once and check off. It's an ongoing responsibility, the same way keeping your recipes consistent is an ongoing responsibility. The price you calculate today is only accurate today. Flour costs what it costs right now. Eggs cost what they cost right now. Your skill level, your speed, the going rate in your market, all of that shifts, sometimes season to season. And a price you set once and never touch quietly goes stale. The same way a recipe you never adjust for a new oven quietly stops turning out right. That 250% gap I told you about earlier, that wasn't one bad guess. That was 5 years of a stale number sitting untouched while everything underneath it kept changing. Ingredient cost climbs, my skill and speed changed, which changed my time bucket. My market changed. My price just sat there, frozen at whatever felt right the day I first typed it into the listing, because revisiting it felt like one more thing on the to-do list that was already getting too long. I want to save you those 5 years. Treat your true cost number the way you'd treat checking the oil in your car. Not something you do once at the very beginning and never again, but something you build a habit around. A quick check-in each season, or anytime a major ingredient cost shifts, or anytime your process gets faster or slower. keeps your price honest to what's actually happening in your kitchen right now instead of what's happening in your kitchen a year and a half ago. That's the responsibility side of this that nobody talks about. Pricing isn't just a formula that you run once. It's a number you're responsible for keeping current on purpose, the same way you're responsible for keeping your ingredients fresh. I want to spend some real time on this piece because I think it's the piece that scares bakers the most, and it's the piece I get asked about constantly, raising your prices. If you've been in business for any amount of time using a guessed price instead of a calculated one, there's a real chance you're underpriced right now. I know that's true because it was true for me for years. And I know the fear that comes with fixing it. What if customers get upset? What if I lose people? What if raising my prices makes me look greedy? I remember the very first time I actually raised my prices to match real math instead of a feeling. I braced for it. I had the whole thing rehearsed in my head, how I'd respond if somebody pushed back, how I'd explain myself, what I'd say if a longtime customer got upset. And then I posted the update, sent the message to my regulars, and nothing happened. Orders kept coming in. Nobody said a word about it. A couple people even said something like, about time, which was not at all what I was ready to hear. That's been true almost every single time since. The fight I was preparing for almost never shows up. What shows up instead is a business that finally pays you fairly for the thing you're actually giving it. Here's what I want you to sit with. A price that reflects your real value isn't greedy. It's honest. You are not overcharging people when you finally charge what the math says you need to charge. You were undercharging them before and quietly subsidizing their order with your own unpaid time and unaccounted costs. Raising your price to the honest number isn't taking something from your customers. It's stopping the practice of giving something away that was never supposed to be free. And practically, how you raise it matters as much as the fact that you're raising it. And this is really where trust comes into the whole conversation. You don't need to apologize. You don't need to write a 3-paragraph explanation justifying yourself. You need a clear, matter-of-fact script delivered with confidence that simply states the new price and the date it takes effect. The bakers who struggle with raising prices usually struggle because they're bracing for a fight that most of the time never actually comes. Most customers don't mind a price increase. The ones who do were probably not paying you a sustainable price to begin with. I think it's worth saying plainly why that trust holds up too. Customers aren't actually rattled by the price increase itself. What erodes trust is a price that feels arbitrary, or a fee that shows up at checkout with no warning, or a number that seems to change depending on the day or who's asking. That's what makes a customer feel like they can't really rely on you. A clear, advanced, consistent price, even a higher one, reads as trustworthy because it tells your customer exactly what to expect and shows them you're running a real business, not winging it. Being upfront about a price change before it happens, giving a real date, and holding to that number once you've announced it is one of the most reliable ways to build loyalty, not lose it. Bakers sometimes worry that raising prices damages the relationship. In my experience, it's the opposite. A baker who's honest and consistent about pricing is a baker people trust enough to keep ordering from for years because the customer never has to wonder what they're actually going to be charged. I want to name the fear directly too, because I don't think naming it enough happens in business content. The fear isn't really about the number. It's about what the number says about you saying it out loud. It feels like announcing, I think I'm worth more in front of people who've been paying the old price. And that feels vulnerable in a way that genuinely is uncomfortable. But here's the reframe that helped me the most. You're not announcing your worth. You're correcting a math error. The old price was wrong. It wasn't wrong because you were wrong. It was wrong because it was a guess made before you had the real numbers. Fixing a math error doesn't require an apology. It requires an update. Starting October 1st, my pricing is adjusting to reflect my current costs. That's the script. No essay required. So here's the honest truth I want to leave you with today. And it's really the whole point of this episode. I built a course because no one taught me this part. It's called the Price It Right, and it walks you through everything I just talked about. The 4-bucket true cost framework, the formula that turns your costs into a real, defensible retail price, and the script for raising your prices without the dread. It comes with the actual calculator I use in my own business right now, today. You plug in your ingredients, your time, your packaging, your overhead. It does the math and hands you back your true costs and a recommended retail price. If you can fill in a grocery receipt, you can use it. I need to say this part clearly. There is no easy button in business. This course gives you the tool. This course gives you the exact steps, but you still have to sit down and do the work. You still have to plug in your real numbers. You still have to actually run the calculator instead of letting it sit open in a browser tab for 3 weeks. I can hand you the formula. I can't do the math for you. Nobody can. That part is yours, and I can't keep your price current for you either. That unkept checking back in every season or two is a responsibility that stays yours for as long as you're in business because it's your kitchen, your ingredients, your costs that keep moving. And I think that's actually good news if you let it be, because it means this isn't about finding some secret hack that skips the work. It means the work is infinite. It's doable in an afternoon. And once it's done, it's done. You have a number you can trust for every single product you make. And for as long as you're in business, as long as you keep coming back to it. There is no version of this business where someone else can hand you a number and it just works for your kitchen, your ingredients, your market, your time. I can't do that. Nobody can. Honestly, no matter what they promise you in an ad. What I can do, what the course does, what the workshop does is hand you the exact formula and walk beside you while you plug in your real numbers so the work that has to happen anyway happens with a clear system instead of a blank spreadsheet and a rising sense of dread. That's the difference between staying stuck and getting unstuck. Not skipping the math, having a map for it, and a habit of checking it. Because a price that's efficient to calculate, current to your real costs, and honestly communicated is how your customers learn they can trust you order after order. If you want to walk through this live with me in real time, on September 3rd, I'm running a live 1-hour Price It Right workshop. 11 to noon Pacific time. We're going to go through the 3 numbers every baker has to know before setting any price. How to calculate your true costs of goods, including the ingredients most people forget to count, and the whole framework live together. And at the end, you get me live to answer whatever specific to your product questions or your situation. You can head over to dannyskitchenshop.com/ price it right, you'll find the details for the live session right there on the page. If pricing has been the thing you've been guessing at, dreading, or avoiding entirely, September 3rd is the day we fix that together. One more thing before I let you go on this. Bring your actual numbers to the workshop if you can. Your ingredient costs, a rough sense of how long a batch takes you. You don't need it perfect. You don't need it organized. Just bring what you've got, because the whole point of that hour is to turn whatever fuzzy numbers you're currently carrying around into one clear, defensible price you can say out loud without flinching. That's the transformation. Fuzzy to clear in about 60 minutes live together. Next week, I'm closing out this series with a conversation about time, specifically how you know where to actually spend it once you start selling. Because here's a preview. Showing up to a market with your fingers crossed is not a strategy. And I'm going to tell you exactly what to do instead. Until then, go do the math. You don't need to feel ready to open that calculator. You just need to open it. I'll see you next week. This has been Mixing Up Success from Dani's Kitchen Shop. If this episode helped, subscribe and send it to a baker who's still guessing at their prices. Talk to you soon.